Okay, well, welcome. Today on the show, I am joined by Kelly Cronin. She is from Wisconsin, and I didn't even say where because that's a hard name to pronounce. I'm sorry. How do you say it?
Milwaukee.
Say it again.
Milwaukee.
Oh, I have like Mukwonago. What is
That
that?
one's McGuanago. That's where I grew up.
There you go. That one's a hard one. She has a 12-year-old daughter, and I brought Kelly on the show. I thought I've already started doing things that she said. So she did 14 days on credit card points to Morocco, London, and Paris. And this was with your 12-year-old daughter and your partner, correct?
Correct.
Yes. And then she just let me know that they're going to Greece, all three of them for $219. So amazing. So that's why I brought her on. So we are going to be talking about travel hacking, how to make travel affordable. Kelly's going to share all of our secrets. I'm so excited. Like I said, I've already started doing some of the things that she said. So Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have you. I really am. I think that's one of the biggest things that keeps people from traveling abroad, right? Is how much it costs. And especially right now.
Imagine all the places you can go if you didn't have to foot an extra, $500-$600 per kid to go places. And I know so many people who just don't do it because of that, but it really isn't it's just a matter of having to plan a little bit more.
Yeah, you do. But if you could do this, I mean, $219 for Greece, and how many days did you say?
We'll be going for 14 days, and we'll be doing some on credit card points for our hotels, credit card points for our 3 flights, and then Skyscanner to find the least expensive flights. And then we'll be doing some home exchanges with our rental places.
Wow. Okay. So we will get into that because these are all things that she's going to talk about. She's obviously following what she's going to talk about. So we'll get into that. Before, though, I thought it was interesting. I kind of wanted to tell our listeners a little bit more about you. So tell us about the many places you call home.
So we have a primary house in Milwaukee, which we do some short-term rentals out of, and it's got 3 living spaces so that I have childcare in the house. My parents live on the first floor, and then we have secondary houses that we do vacation rentals out of in Vieques, Puerto Rico, and Kasilof, Alaska. Up until just recently, we had one in Indianola, Utah, and then we have glamping experiences that we're creating in Ladysmith, Wisconsin.
Okay. And you just kind of bounce around?
We do. We're generally bouncing around to do whatever work needs to happen. So, for example, we'll need to put in a new fence in Vieques, Puerto Rico. So that'll be a couple of months coming up here in the future for Vieques. Currently, my significant other is up in Alaska, completely refitting a dome house, a geodesic dome house. With a lofted bedroom and just a beautiful area of Kasilof, Alaska. And yes, that's going really well. In fact, he's putting in windows as we speak.
Well, that's exciting. But these are also, it's like, darn, I have to go to beautiful Alaska, and darn, I have to go to beautiful Puerto Rico. But you did that intentionally.
It's a rough life.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to talk about how you kind of picked your vacation rentals because I wanted to share that with people as well. Before we kind of get into travel hacking, though, I thought it was very interesting about your daughter's school and why you did what you did. So do you mind sharing with our listeners about your daughter's school?
No, not at all. So we actually decided to put her in a French immersion school. There are several different immersion schools here in Milwaukee, and they're all charter schools. So they're part of the Milwaukee school system, which is notoriously not a great school system, but the charter schools do really, really well for our Milwaukee students. And I absolutely loved the idea of immersion schools. I would have loved to have put her in a German immersion school, but the reason we chose French as opposed to the other ones is because you walk on playground and it looks like the United Nations. It's just the most diverse and robust situation that I've ever seen. And I loved the idea of her having that international perspective and that international acceptance. And I didn't have that growing up in McGuanago. It was very closed off, except for my best friend was from Jordan. And so it was just a situation where I wanted more diversity for her. And when we found that school, we really know that was it. And to this date, she's really only had 2 American teachers. Every other teacher has been African or French, or gosh, there was one from the Cameroon. There was one from China who didn't speak hardly any English, but spoke perfect French. And we really loved that for her. So at this point, you know, if I can talk anyone into anything, it's the idea of doing some type of foreign language school or foreign immersion school, just because of the fact that you get such a good perspective.
Yeah, and I wanted you to share that because honestly, I had no idea places like that existed. I just go to the school in my district and that's where I go. If I would have known places like this existed, I would have jumped on it because I would love for my son to be around a bunch of different many cultures and learn a language. And I think I love that you're doing that and your daughter's, I mean, she benefits so much because you looked into that. So I wanted to make sure other people knew that these types of places existed if you're looking for a similar experience. I'm not sure if it's in every location, but at least it's worth thinking about it just in case. Hey, I wonder if this is close to me.
Well, the nice thing too is that the French government is actually very, very supportive of this. And there's something called the DELF test, which is a test that tests for foreign language proficiency in French. And the very, very nice thing about that is that if you get a high enough score, you get to go to college in France, which is incredibly cost effective compared to the US. You know, we're talking $2,300 per semester versus $23,000 per semester. And then beyond that, there is actually a scholarship awarded with a highest DELF score that allows you to go to college for free. And so that's part of her entire life plan, is to finish off college in France and you know, save some money that way and get the life experience of actually going to school in France.
Good for her. I really hope she does it. I really do. And then you can just get a house out there too.
So we have some money saved aside for her college degree, and she did some research into it. It can be used for housing instead. So if she goes to college in France, you know, the vast majority of that will be left over. She'll use that as a down payment. She'll invite some friends to live with her so that she has no mortgage, and she'll have a partially paid for house by the time she's done with college.
So is this one of those like state savings programs that we have in the States? And that's good to know then too, because I had no idea you could use it for housing. So that's good for Americans to know who have a similar plan for their kid, because I do for mine and I never thought of housing. So that's really good to know.
Use it for housing. You can use it for food while you're there. You know, if you get a full ride, then you can use it for books or really anything that's school associated. And so with that, you know, she can use it towards a mortgage for wherever she's staying.
That's great. That's great to know. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that. Okay, travel hacking. I'm very excited about this. Let's start with credit cards. Let's talk about kind of what you do overall.
I think the very first thing that I want to say is that credit cards can be just a horrible thing to get into. And so I just really want to put this out there. If you are not at a point in your life where you can reliably use credit cards without using them for extra things, I really want you to think about, you know, really looking into some of the initial financial education, either through James Ramsey, or there's a lot of good ones out there. Choose Financial Independence or ChooseFI has some great ones out there. Start there. But if you are relatively good at utilizing your credit wisely, this is where you can really make some difference in terms of what you can actually overall afford in your life. And I think Paula Pant says it very, very well. She says you can afford anything, you just can't afford everything. And so when we're thinking about, you know, our lifestyle and creating a budget, I was finding that a very, very large chunk of mine was really rotated around traveling, because I love traveling and I don't ever want to be, you know, in a situation where that's the thing that I cut out of my life. And so I decided that as a low income earner, I really needed to think about ways to do it just a little bit smarter. And so I started looking at the idea of, you know, speaking in order to pay for my traveling, or doing some, you know, some travel nursing as a veterinary technician to pay for some of my travel. But really what changed my whole life, and Erica knows this one already, is ChooseFI. They have a podcast number 9 tells you about travel hacking. And the moment I heard it, it absolutely changed my life. It was a situation where I know that I can use credit appropriately. In fact, I'm very, very good at making sure that I pay my credit card before I put the charge on the credit card.
Yeah.
And so I'm never going to get in a situation where I'm paying a lot for the credit use. And instead, I use that opening of credit cards to get the opening mileage or points or whatever might be associated with the opening. And I stack that in order to use it towards my travel. And then I also do a little bit of finagling either on Skyscanner or on the website for the airline to really find out when travel is the most economical in terms of points. And what you'll notice too is that especially when we're talking about things like hotel points and things like that, a lot of times those are a lot more economical than trading in points for dollars.
Yeah.
And so when we're thinking about this, more often than not, we can actually stack those credit cards, like doing a business credit card and a personal credit card, in order to get to where we need to be for our opening points to actually utilize it for travel. Now, things to think about there. A lot of people say, gosh, I just don't have a business. I totally understand that. However, there are lots of different ways of having a business. We're going to talk about short-term rentals. That's one of the vehicles that I certainly use as a business. And what I'll say too is that if you haven't figured out a way to make money and to really, gain overall growth outside of your job or your position, having a business, having the tax benefits for it, and having the benefits such as credit cards for it are really a phenomenal way of doing it. Now, it doesn't have to be a big business. You don't have to make a ton of money. You don't even have to make any money. It's just the idea of having that business to have the benefits associated with it. And so anyways, back to that statement, I always try to make sure that I'm putting enough time in between those opening of credit cards, making sure that, I'm being aware of what the opening rules are in terms of, hey, I can't open that same credit card every 2 years, or I can't open so many in a space of 5 years. There's just a lot of things that you want to take into account when you're doing it. But when you've actually done it, the amount that you make from doing these opening balance offers is so significantly larger to the 10th degree than what you'd get by spending money on those cards, that you really want to think about closing them down and reopening them, or switching credit card offers to really rotate through the opening offers. For example, just to tell you a real quick one, for Southwest, if you open a personal Southwest and a business Southwest, we'll get 50,000 points from one, 70,000 points from the other, just for opening them and just for spending around $9,000 total. And then when you take that $9,000, you'll also get the points from the $9,000. Plus, with that, you'll get something called the Companion Pass, which allows anyone to fly for free with you for an entire year. And that doesn't take any points to do that. So during the time period that my daughter and I did the business and the personal Southwest cards, we actually went on 17 flights. I want to say for $329, and that's just, port fees and whatever, additional fees are associated with it. And some of those were outside the country, which were a little bit more, $83 instead of the normal $11 per flight. But imagine going to Hawaii. We went to Atlanta. We went to Ohio. We went to Cleveland. We went to 2 places in Mexico. We went to Canada. We went all over the place for just this little tiny bit of money. And it was really impactful.
Yeah. And so a couple things I want to note about what you've been speaking about. One, I want to bring up the fact that you are not some really wealthy person, or when you started this, you were not. You were making, like you said, low income. And the reason why
$20 an hour my entire career up until the last 4 years.
Say that again?
$10 to $20 my entire career up until the last 4 years.
So up until the last 4 years. So the whole reason for saying this is because anybody can do this. Anybody can do this. This is not for someone who's wealthy. Whereas, a lot of people assume that if you're traveling out of the country, that you must have a lot of money. And I don't think that's the case. It's that people find a way to make it happen, right? This is a priority, so you find a way. And even when you're low income, you find a way. So I wanted to bring that up. Like Kelly said, I did I listened to what Kelly talked about, and I already listened to the ChooseFI episode. So I will make sure to put that in the notes so you know where to go, because they were great with giving you a lot of information. Kelly's kind of giving you an overview, whereas they break it down, which I think is, I mean, it was great. Another thing to bring up. So you get these cards. You have to pay attention to how many cards you can have within a certain time period, but basically you close them after after you basically get your bonus, right? Or
Correct.
whatever the require, like if you have to keep it open for a certain time, you as soon as it's done, then you close it.
Most of them don't have much of a requirement on the backside. And so what I'll do is I'll generally get to the end of my opening bonus structure. And as soon as I hit that bonus, I will close at least one of them. And then I'll generally close the other one very quickly after that. Reason being is that I want that 2 years rest period to come into play so that I can reopen them and switch to a different card service. And so I'll usually open them just before I have some big purchases, and I'll try and do a stacking of all my purchases so that I can hit that spend limit, because I'm pretty frugal, and I don't know about you guys, but you might be frugal as well. And so I'll make sure that my car insurances, any type of, home improvement projects, anything like that will be stacked at the point that I'm going to open a new credit card. It's become a little bit easier now that I have multiple, home remodel projects going on at the same time. But when I was just, when I was not doing as much in the rental properties, I really needed to make sure that I stacked it so that I never had a problem hitting that bonus.
Yeah. And now let's talk about credit, because I know, like me, that was one of the first questions I had, like, how is this affecting your credit? And you said something to me before that we started recording today that was just amazing to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started this, I was very concerned about my credit as well. And what I'll say is that utilization is almost more important than overall credit use. So utilization, meaning that you're rotating through it, paying it off, and really running your credit in an active way. Now, what I'll say is that when I first started this, I had a 790 credit score. And once I have, at this point, I have both a HELOC loan on myself, and I have one other big credit hit from one of the houses that we purchased that actually shows up on my credit. And I have 4 credit cards open at the moment. And between all of that, my score is now an 840.
Which is crazy to me. Like, I seriously, because my thought was, well, they always tell you longevity, and then it's going to hit you every time you get a credit card, right? There's that hard hit. Well, how much is that hard hit really affecting you then if you do this? Because how many cards would you say you get every 2-year period?
So every 2 years, I'm hitting 5 credit cards.
5 credit cards. Okay. 5 credit cards. Now in my head, that's like, oh, that's a lot of hard hits on your credit, right? And here your credit goes up. So yes. Like you said, I think it's the use is more important than the hard hits. And I think that's important to remember, because you're proof that look at how much it jumped. So I think that's really good to know from somebody who's actually doing it. And like you said, that you were mentioning before, that the HELOC is like more of a negative hit against your credit. Yep. And you still grew.
Exactly. Well, and the HELOC was, a $70,000 hit, as opposed to my credit cards, which are, $15,000 to $20,000 a piece. And so when you think about it, those big hits didn't even bring down my credit score. I think it's just the fact that I'm constantly rotating through and paying it off appropriately that really looks good on the credit score.
See, and I love knowing that. Now, so you have about 5 credit cards every 2 years. You'll sign up for new credit cards.
And I actually do that on a yearly rotation. So I'll do the first year on 2 credit cards, and then I'll rotate to the next set, and then I'll rotate to the next set. And what'll happen is every 2 years I can sign up for the same set. So I just rotate between my 2 bigger ones, and then I'll fluctuate in some of the ones that I'm going to use for, say, hotel points.
Okay. No, that's good to know. So you can reapply for the same one, as she said. Let's see. I just want to make sure, because I think we covered a lot.
I think the listeners are going to ask a question. They're going to ask which credit cards they should be opening.
Yes, you are correct.
I'm going to answer that question. That really depends on what your goals are. So really what you're going to do in order to figure out which credit cards you need to be opening and how you're going to really think about this is I want you guys to think about where you want to go. I want you to think about like, hey, this is my dream vacation and this is what I'm going to plan for. And then I want you to really think about what is going to be the most appropriate point schedule for that. There are tons and tons of, information bites out on the internet to tell you about this. But an example would be if I wanted to go to Greece, which I do, I did some research as to which of the credit cards, not even so much credit cards, but which of the flight providers were going to be the best bet for getting to Greece. And so United is the clear-cut winner. When I look at United and I look at how many points I actually need to travel over there, I came up with roughly 70,000 points. And when I'm thinking about that 70,000 points, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, so now I need 70,000 points for each of us, 140, 210,000 points. What do I need to do in terms of the credit cards that I open in order to get to that? And now I would say that, my significant and I are not, we're not actually married. And so we don't use his credit for this, but if you don't list them as a credit utilization, so if you don't use them as a second person spending, you can use your significant other for a third credit card of the same type to get to the point value that you really want to.
Yeah, and that's what they do talk about in that ChooseFI episode, that technically a couple can have 10 credit cards, which sounds crazy. But again, this is 10 credit cards. So think about how many bonuses you're getting in those 2 years, right? And that's what they say. It's like a gold mine there. It's very fascinating. Now, other than this episode, which again, I'll put it in the notes, are there any other resources you could recommend just specifically on credit cards?
Yes, there's an episode, or not an episode, but a podcast called Extra Pack of Peanuts. I would very much say that that's a good one. And then the Points Guy is another great one to really use as your resources.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, now let's move on to some other things that you do, like homestays.
Yes. Yep.
So let's talk about that. I know, let's just let you start talking about that.
So one of the things that we're doing in conjunction with going to Greece is we're actually trading homestays. And so with that, what we've done is we have our vacation rentals and we've traded dates with someone else in order to utilize their place in Greece. And there's lots of different websites out there. There's lots of different places that you can actually list your place in order to do a trade or a homestay trade. And it's really nice because it's day for day. And so when I'm doing a homestay trade, for example, the one that's coming up in Greece, we got contacted by a human being who clearly does not know that they're getting 850 square feet of quaint cuteness in Vieques, Puerto Rico with roosters crowing. They have no idea that there's going to be wild horses in the yard and that, it's very, very charming, but it is not a palatial estate with a giant infinity pool looking at the beach.
Yeah.
And so we tried to be very upfront with this person. However, they are intent and hell-bent for leather that they want to come to Vieques, to the brightest bio bay in the world. They want to meet the turtles, and they want to see the wild horses that outnumber the people, and they want to stay on beaches where no one else is, and power to them. And so we're going to be doing a trade for them. And then we have another trade that we'll be doing for 2 days. That's actually a cave-built house. So the back portion of the house is built into a cave.
Wow.
On a Greek island. And it's just an incredible way of utilizing, your vacation rental in ways that don't necessarily drive additional taxes, but allow you to take some pretty incredible vacations and kind of get you out of your comfort zone. Now, the other part of homestays that I do want to talk about is another thing that I think can really help out if you don't have vacation rentals or if you don't really have, the funds to do vacations. There are a ton of homestay networks that actually let you stay and take care of homes or even bigger than that, pets. In exchange for being in this other location. So a lot of us in veterinary medicine tend to take that that opportunity to go over, watch someone's high need animal and in exchange for that stay in incredible places. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Well, that's an interesting idea too for animal lovers. I mean, travel the world just taking care of animals. That's interesting.
I have a friend who does not have a primary residence and just does that continually. So it clearly is the way to go for some people.
And do you happen to have the resource for that, or is that purely through veterinarian?
No. I would say that there's a lot of different ones out there. If you search the internet, they'll come up. But
Okay.
for example, Pet Sitters Internationals is a good one. Homesteaders International. There's I'm trying to think of some other, but there's quite a few of them out there.
This is opening my eyes. This is something else I didn't even know about. See, I'm excited about that.
I think
Again,
if you have a will, you have a way. You just have to figure
yeah,
out what it
it's
is.
just you don't think of the ideas, and it can be overwhelming to think. Like
Yes.
it can be overwhelming. So to have this information is so helpful. Okay, now I know one of the things that you got into as well was writing copy for rentals. Like, how did you get
Yes.
into that? Because that's another way for free board as well.
So I've been on quite a few different podcasts of late, just because of trying to get, the name of our vacation rentals out there, get people to understand what Vieques is, what Kasilof, Alaska has to offer, just all the incredible places that we've fallen in love with, and therefore, that's why we have vacation rentals there. And in the process thereof, someone heard one of those podcasts and really loved the way that the story was told about our places. Just, fell in love with the idea, clearly not with the idea of being cold in Alaska, but with the idea of meeting some moose in the backyard, or, laying in bed and watching the northern lights from our loft and things like that. And reached out to me very randomly to ask me to do the copy for his Airbnb. So as he's getting ready to start short-term rentaling his two places, he had reached out and had asked me to please come stay at his place and write some information and set him up with a guest book and a guest guidebook, and to make sure that he had a good cleaning list, and just to kind of dot all those I's and cross all those T's for a really good listing. And since then, I've had two others who've reached out to me for very similar things, either to put together their website or to put together their copy, really get things, started on the books. And I'm super happy to say that all of them are flourishing and doing really well. And beyond that, a quick stay in crazy cool places is definitely, well worth it. Plus, getting a little bit of extra income from that was really amazing.
Yeah.
And I think some people who are maybe not as into writing the copy just recognize that there's something that you can offer. For example, our first stay in Vieques was actually an incredible photographer who came out and did just wonderful pictures, Dorian Sanders, of our little island and all of the island glory. Just amazing, sea pictures, and such beautiful pictures of the night sky. And so he was able to trade, photography for this initial stay. And same thing goes for someone who potentially is going to come in and do some, some decorating of the location or whatever that might be. There's a lot of different things that you can trade in exchange for, really providing good use to the person who is giving you that stay, but also to, to potentially get that free stay as well.
So it's another creative way to travel that you might not think about. So not every way will fit, but if we just keep throwing different opportunities out there, maybe one will work for someone.
The idea is not to necessarily give you answers. The idea is to get you thinking about what answers you're going to come up with for yourself.
Yes, and that's true. And honestly, if you don't have time, or there's a lot of different excuses you can make, right? We're just going to make it harder for you to have those excuses, because we're going to plant these seeds, and then eventually you'll go, oh, there is a way.
Well, and I challenge those who don't have time. I challenge them because of the fact that if you have time to watch a rerun, you have time.
Yes.
Now, if you have time to hang out and play with your kid, you have time to do something. Because honestly, like, there are ways to incorporate your kids in the things that you're planning. There are ways to, utilize your time in a, multi-purpose way. There's always that question of time. And my question back to them is it a priority?
Yeah. And the idea as well is if you're able to travel, then you're able to have more quality time, right? because that's definitely one way of doing it as well. Okay, now you mentioned Scanner a couple times. I've heard of Skyscanner, but what makes Skyscanner so great?
So the nice thing about that is it allows you to program where you want to go, and it starts sending you idea flights. And so it really keeps an eye on the flights that you'd like to take and gives you a good indicator as to when those things come down. And so
Yeah.
it just does a lot of the work for you so that you don't have to keep checking back at sites.
So when is it a good time to use this? Like when you're planning months out? Like when does
All of the above.
Okay.
So when you're planning months out, it's great to get your name out there for the dates that you want or for the places that you want, because potentially a date will come up that'll be a little bit less. But when you're actually going to plan, it'll tell you if there's a couple days off one way or another that might help you. What I'll tell you that Skyscanner did for us for the 14-day trip to Morocco and in London and Paris was when we were first planning that trip, my daughter said it was her first international trip, which means that she gets to pick the destination. She said, I want to go to Africa and I want to go to France and I want to go to London. And I said, well, that's amazing. Did you find someone to pay for all that? And when we're starting to get ready for really looking at things, what Skyscanner was able to do was it was able to tell me that if I went a certain route, it was half the price of having gone a different route. And so if I wanted to go to Africa, it would have cost me an arm and a leg, and I would never have been able to do it. But if I come through Iceland, came to London, came to Paris, and then flew a hopper flight to Morocco, boom, I was in Africa for $39 a piece. And then, if I hedged that Morocco to London flight, that's where I really saved all the money. And then I was able to use my points for the initial flight to Paris. And I ended up paying in cash for one of my flights home from London because it was so much cheaper for the three of us. The three of us were $792 as opposed to what it normally would have cost. And all of that was Skyscanner based.
Okay, that's great to know. Because like I said, I hear about it and then there's so many sites out there, right? So which ones do you use? How do you know when to use them? Okay, now let's dive deeper into your vacation rentals because there's a lot more information that you have to share about that. So as we mentioned, you did not have a huge income. So how did you afford your first rental?
So some of that has been just a meticulous saving. And one of the things that I'll say is that, my first house, and houses thereafter that, I've always looked at my houses as a potential source of income. So I love the idea of, duplexes and things like that, where someone else is actually paying your mortgage and you only really need to come up with the down payment. I love the idea of the fact that duplexes are generally being compared against places that are a little bit lower in terms of cost. And so when you actually purchase duplexes, a lot of times they're lower than a lot of other houses in some of the neighborhoods. And so I think that there's ways to there's ways to really gamify the system in terms of how you live to really save up. And over time, I've been able to both gamify how I've lived that way, but also, really gaming how I do things outside of that, making sure that I don't pay for cable. I never have. I've always driven an older car. I have always made sure that the things that I'm spending money on are going to make me money back. So I put more money into things that are potential investments. And over time, I've been able to save about 50% of my income, even when I was really low income. And some of that was, alternative stays. Certainly we're all about thinking about how we can make sure that when we're staying someplace that it's a really low cost thing for us. And so over time, saving up that money and then putting it into an investment where, if we do something in the whole market, we know that we're going to get at least doubling of our investment every 10 years or so. And so that reinvesting and knowing that when I use my 401k, right, that reduces my tax load. That means more money in my pocket up until 2% for most people. When you're contributing 2% to your 401k, that's coming out of the government's pocket, not your pocket. So that's really an impactful, amazing things as well. It never has reduced my overall, take home pay to do up to that 2%. Now it's starting to, because now I'm currently making a little bit more than that threshold. But for the most part, most people are not going to be hit with any kind of reduced take-home pay for that. And so over time, I was able to either save up that money in the 401k or in my individual investments, and I use that as my down payment. But then I also look for alternative type of properties. So for example, the house in Utah, which unfortunately we no longer have because the state of Utah deemed it not a house. It's too small, but it was really incredibly cute and wonderful, and we loved it. With that, I would just go on Zillow and set my maximum to $50,000 and just look state to state to state for kitschy, cute little rentals that would do okay, that I could set up as really off-grid, interesting places to stay that were within my budget, which was very, very low, and potentially something that was difficult for them to sell to other people, which would mean that I could have a conversation with them about potentially doing something called owner financing, which allows me to put a certain amount down, but then means that the owner effectively is the one carrying that note. And so instead of me borrowing money from a bank, I'm paying that money towards the owner. They're making a hefty profit because of the fact that they're not having to pay out that tax right away, and they're getting a 5 to 6%, income from that property until I finish paying it off. But they don't have any of the headache of dealing with that property because now it's mine. And guess what? If I default on that property, then they get that property back. And so it's a win-win for those owners. But it's also a win-win for me because all of a sudden, A, I don't have a ton of money that I have taken out in my name. B, I have, that availability of cash to doing any kind of renovation that I might need to. C, I can start earning money, and potentially that renter or that series of renters for vacation rentals would actually be paying my mortgage. And so there's just a lot of win-win there. And I was able to buy, actually, it just turned out as kismet, but I was able to buy 3 small rentals in the time frame of that year. And then I was able to add an additional 80 acres in Ladysmith, Wisconsin on owner financing as well.
Wow. Yeah, because you said that you like to go more off the grid versus touristy places. Mm-hmm. You found that to be the most, well, a couple of reasons, right? You said choose places that fill your soul, ignites your soul, but then you also thought there was a benefit of choosing off the grid versus touristy.
I think that you get a little bit of a different, vibe, and you also get a little bit of a different type of stay. So I think if you pick, a quintessential home with a pool rental in Florida right next to Disney World, you're going to get a certain type of person who's staying there. They expect, only the best. They are going to have their very big fun. They're just going to, they're really on vacation. Whereas somebody who comes to a little bit more of a out of the way place, for example, Vieques, Puerto Rico, they had to do a little work to get there. They understand that it's an island off an island. They really understand that, hey, there's going to be roosters in the yard, and hey, there's going to be wild horses, and our yard iguana Bob is going to hang out with them. But they're also going to get, we love him. But they also get this incredible experience that they're not going to get anywhere else. And so, do those owners have a little bit of a ruckus over a single bug in the house? Absolutely not. Like, they recognize that it's an island house and that we have an exterminator that comes on a monthly basis, and that, it is what it is. But they're also staying in this very cute little lofted bedroom. They open their Florida doors and let the tropical breeze come in, or they sit on their porch every night, drinking their drinks, watching the darkest night sky you've ever seen in your life. And like, it's okay. It's okay that the cookie frogs are a little bit loud at night. And yes, we give them earplugs just in case, but it's okay. And so I think that you just get people who really exceptionally love the experience the same way that you do, as opposed to people who are potentially, really looking for a hotel stay.
Yeah, they're just replacing it with a hotel. And that makes sense. And I know the other reason why you said to pick a place that ignites your souls. I mean, look at you guys are both spending time there. So then you get the benefits as well.
Absolutely. We have a rule. Steve and I have a rule that and Izzy, my daughter as well, we have a rule that we're never going to buy in a place that we can't talk about with love. So when you think about, writing copy, and when you think about doing marketing, and when you think about, all of the multitudes of things that you have to do to have a vacation rental really hit the rails running, you don't want it to be work. I don't want to replace my job with more work. I want to replace my job, or maybe not even replace my job, because I love my day job, all 60 hours a week of it. But I want to make sure that when I'm doing that extra 10 hours on the weekend, that I'm talking about a place that like makes me kind of tear up to talk about. I want to think about a place that has the bluest waters in the whole wide world, and then think about the fact that we have the same thing in Alaska. Our river in Alaska is the bluest thing you've ever seen in your lifetime. And honestly, like, if you own a vacation rental that, you're kind of, I don't care if I go back to, it's not the same.
I think it's a really good point, though. It's like, be smart with this investment, because it's also a way for you to travel to another place as well. And if you don't like it, then you're missing out on the whole benefit of having a place that you make money from, but you also get to enjoy.
And I think there's a lot of people out there, and I know it would be significantly easier if I just picked up 5 places here in Milwaukee, right? And I just had 5 rentals going strong. I know that would be easier than getting a fridge delivered to Vieques, Puerto Rico. I know that it would be so much easier than getting a giant soaker tub delivered to Kasilof, Alaska. Like, I know that. However, would I enjoy it, or would that be an extra amount of work? Would I be frustrated every time somebody has a problem, as opposed to, really having a fun conversation with people who just want to know where to get the best rum on an island? Well, go down to Crab Island. Or, where to go for the best fishing charter? Well, if you go out to Soldotna, like, that's the place to be. I think that honestly, like, I'd much rather spend all of my time talking about the things that I love.
I think that's a really great point. Really great advice for anyone who's thinking of this option. Now, you do also offer a course, so I want to make sure people are aware of that.
Fantastic.
If you want to talk about that real quick.
Absolutely. So on our website, www.croninscastles.com, you'll see a link to a course. And I'll tell you the iteration of this course. I took a course from another person who, I classify as a mentor to me, and just a phenomenal vacation rental host, just wonderful. And I spent $1,000, and I got to the end of it, and I didn't have the nuts and the bolts to actually make things very easy. And so when I first started putting things together for our rentals, I wanted to make sure that it was repeatable, so that as I kept adding rentals, I could potentially have a virtual assistant or someone like that help me really work through it. And in doing that, I thought to myself, gosh, if I only had all of this available to me when I first started, if that $1,000 course had really, done that for me, my God, would my life have been easier? Yeah. And so I actually produce veterinary courses online and on demand. And I thought, well, I'm going to do this for this because, in the future, I'll have a virtual assistant. In the future, I might have friends who ask. And honestly, it's come in handy so many times just because family members have asked about it, that even if it doesn't make a dime, it's there for the family members. And I did want to put some fee on it just to make sure that when people actually pay for it and do it, there was a little bit of an onus to actually get out there and take that step and make that leap. Like, I spent $300 on this course. Now I'm going to really do it. But I wanted to make sure that it was nice and affordable, because honestly, if every single mom in the world did this, we'd have a generational wealth, a correction of generational wealth gap that would be just astronomical. And so my hope is that my hope is that someone else can take this and really utilize it and put it into action. I do put a 30-minute coaching call on that just because, people might have questions outside of what the course covers, and I want to make sure that it's really bang for their buck so that there's nothing in the way of them getting started with things.
I think it's great because one thing to like your course that you took $1,000, and this is okay. If I had just that little bit more, and so you reduce the price and offer just that little bit more of the nuts and bolts. So, I mean, it's a win-win, right? So I will make sure to put your website in here. Do you have any other resources that you recommend for anybody looking into vacation rentals?
Absolutely. Yes. The biggest one that I would say has really formatted my way of thinking and certainly, how I've put things together and some of the true ways of looking at what that vacation rental is going to do to you overall and making sure that it's an appropriate investment. There's something called Bigger Pockets. And actually, we were very happy to be part of Bigger Pockets. I can't remember the episode number now, but we were on that for Cronin's Castles, and it's just an incredible community, but also a really incredible podcast. So if you really want to deep dive on vacation rentals or rentals in general, midterm rentals, just building wealth through real estate, Bigger Pockets, a really phenomenal resource, and they have thousands of episodes and several different spin-offs. So you can go really deep down into a rabbit hole with that. But they also have, which is incredibly useful, an ROI calculator that will actually allow you to put in how much you're paying for the rental, how much you anticipate, getting out of that rental. And it really allows you to calculate whether it's going to be a smart investment overall. And when you think about that, you really have to think about whether that rental is going to be supportive of what it should be in terms of income coming back, because remember, you want to balance where your investments go. And if you could make more in the stock market, you'd want to do that as opposed to a rental. So when we're doing that, we really want to calculate out what that looks like. And then secondarily, it makes you want to make sure that if you ever get something where, say, vacation rentals are outlawed or something along those lines, you want that secondary option of being able to either flip that house or utilize that house as a long-term or midterm rental. And so when you're thinking about all of that, that ROI calculator that exists on Bigger Pockets is a really, really good instrument.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that tip as well. Okay. So as we wrap up, I thought it was cute to hear that you and your daughter write travel novels. So if you want to just talk about that real quick, I would love to hear about it.
Sure. We, as you know, she goes to a French immersion school. It's essentially an inner city school. And so it's a really big dichotomy over, some folks who potentially have never been outside the city of Milwaukee versus some really well-traveled, kids in that school. Well, in their 5th grade, they always go on a trip to France, which is an amazing thing. And so
5th grade.
Yes, 5th grade. It's so fun. And so we wanted to contribute to that. And beyond that, Izzy and I, we really thought that we ran into a problem where we couldn't find any travel novels that had female heroines in it. And so even, you think about like the Magic Treehouse and things like that, there's a guy in it as well. And so we really wanted to be able to write, the quintessential travel novel that really focused on just a girl doing it all. And, really something that highlighted the math and the culture and the language of whatever place IQ Cronin, our heroine, goes. And so when we were putting all of that together, we had an awful lot of fun writing the first one. We were about halfway through the second one. And we thought, if we could publish this, maybe someone would feel a little bit more empowered as a young lady, traveling around. Or, maybe someone would get bit by the travel bug, even if they haven't done that travel before. And maybe it could focus and, really benefit her school, Milwaukee French Immersion. So just really had an awful lot of fun putting that together. And we haven't been able to donate much because we haven't done a lot with it, but it's been an awful lot of fun with what we have done.
Yeah, anything that tries to inspire other people to get out there and travel is great in my book. So for sure, how would they find out information about that?
So that one is called IQ Cronin and the Rainy Days. And if you search it online, it'll come up. There's an independent publisher that still holds on to that. It has not been released to Amazon because Amazon changed their formatting requirements. But it's pretty inexpensive and an awful lot of fun.
Okay, well, great. Now, if people want to reach out to you to ask you any other questions, what's the best way to connect with you?
Absolutely. My email is right on our web pages, so croninscastles.com, and you can get to me right through there, or you're welcome to reach out to me through Facebook or LinkedIn, Kelly Lynn Cronin. I'm super happy to connect with anyone. If you want to get into travel hacking, or if you want to do vacation rentals, you name it, you let me know. We can talk about it. All of the stuff really ignites my soul.
Well, thank you for that offer because, like I told you, I was so excited. I listened to that. I think I listened that night to that episode. I'm like, I'm ready. I got my credit card. I'm ready to go. So I'm the start, right? But at least it's a start. And so thank you for putting you out there as a resource as well. That's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you again for sharing everything. So many links to share, so many resources, so many different ways to get information so people feel confident to do these different things. But thank you for sharing. I really appreciate you coming on.
Oh, this was so much fun. And absolutely, if you're hesitating at all to reach out, please do. I'd love to have a chat.
Thanks, Kelly.